is that the complexion of Cain could neutralize the fears on the part of minorities, minorities who were Spanish and black Southerners, to feel that the concerns on race behind some of these very, very, conservative positions on things such as immigration, that they need not necessarily be as paranoid and as fearful about those things. So that's why I think, despite Cain's extremely, conservative and reactionary and insensitive positions on, immigration issues and the fence on the border and electrification and all of these things, I think these things could still, be neutralized because of the complexion factor in the situation. But the final aspect I'd like to speak to in terms of the Cain candidacy, which I think black pundits, black politicians, and I'm talking now about traditional Democratic black pundits and political people, as well as the liberal pundits and media. I think they have to be very careful to not make the same mistake that they made in the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill situation of 30 years ago. Maybe it wasn't 30, maybe it was just about 20 years ago, I think, with Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Clarence Thomas, I think, is the emblem of the perfect black conservative. And I say conservative, I'm talking about, not a moderate conservative, but a moderate to extreme conservative. He succeeded in getting on the Supreme Court. He replaced the great image of Thurgood Marshall, who was clearly a liberal black political personage of great stature. And Clarence Thomas, in many ways, is the antithesis of Thurgood Marshall. But black people wanted to have a replacement on the Supreme Court. And when Thurgood Marshall died, having someone, if it wasn't going to be a liberal black, it certainly couldn't be another Thurgood Marshall. The Republicans weren't going to put one on there. It was better to have a black conservative in the form of a Clarence Thomas than to have nobody. And so when the Anita Hill issue came up, there wasn't anybody to replace Clarence Thomas on the Republican short list other than Clarence Thomas. And if we didn't get Clarence Thomas on there, is the thinking of many black people, then we might not get a black on the Supreme Court for another 50 years. And so there was a strong practical reason for a lot of black people to want to work with Clarence Thomas. And many of them hoped that they could reform Clarence Thomas. Many of them thought that perhaps Clarence Thomas had played that right-wing conservative card just to get on the Supreme Court, and that once he got there, he was going to start talking another tune, you see. But I didn't believe it at the time, because I thought that once Clarence Thomas got on the Supreme Court, he would want to outdo the tenure of Thurgood Marshall and actually become the first black Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, because everyone dismissed and diminished his judicial prowess in comparison to Thurgood Marshall. In fact, one Texas black congressman derisively described Clarence Thomas as, in comparison to Thurgood Marshall's stature, he said that Clarence Thomas was not capable of shining Thurgood Marshall's shoes. That compared to Thurgood Marshall, Clarence Thomas was nothing but a shoeshine boy. And that was one of the most elitist and derogative comments that I think was made. And it stuck out in my mind particularly, and I think it struck a sour note on the minds of a lot of Southern blacks because I used to be a shoeshine boy myself, and I know there were a lot of young black boys both in the North and the South that at one time or another used to shine shoes to make some extra money. In my case, I did it because my family owned a shoe shine shop, but that was my first job as a 10-year-old, and I was happy to have that job. But the way for Clarence Thomas to trump the achievement of Thurgood Marshall would have been for him to somehow use his tenure on the Supreme Court to actually become the first black Chief Justice. And I think that if he had been able to manage that, and if Bush had appointed him, Bush Jr. had appointed him to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court instead of Justice Roberts, then I think a lot of historians would have to have equated Clarence Thomas, at least at a stature comparable to Thurgood Marshall. So in my mind, I didn't think the chances were good for Clarence Thomas to ever become, a more liberal-minded justice after he got on the Supreme Court. But I did think, because I thought he had another ambition, and he didn't succeed, but he certainly, has remained true to his conservative roots. And so in the case of Anita Hill, aside from the fact that Clarence Thomas was the only choice to replace Thurgood Marshall, and that was a very, very big symbol of achievement for black people at that particular time, the fact that there was such an attack on Clarence Thomas by so many in the liberal media, and it was such an intense attack, and the fact that a black woman was accusing him of sexual misconduct, and it certainly appeared to be a questionable situation as to the foundation for her charges. It was certainly a contradictory situation because she, at the same time that she was complaining about his inappropriate behavior privately with her, she was chasing after him and trying to use him and use her status and relationship with him for her own career advancement at the same time.